What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the Hold Up TV, your source for the content made by the content creators you love. Tonight we got a special guest, special host. He's my co-host on Fanboy Modeling School. He is an eco-environment terrorist. He is also the last conservative standing at most dinner parties. Welcome, the voice of the fat Mantis.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me, Steve.
You know what, Roy? I always feel like you and I are stuck in perpetual deja vu. It's almost as if we had sat down and had this very same conversation we're about to have. But I digress. None of that is irrelevant. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I am living the proverbial dream.
Just a proverbial dream?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I left a comment on another YouTuber's thing, and I originally said, no, in their live stream, they were like, how is everybody doing? And I said, I'm happy to be alive. And then the person said, Roy is happy to be alive. And they had this look like they were like, and I had to put in the comments later, I was like, not that there was a chance I was going to die or anything. I'm just a happy guy. You know, everybody thinks there's something suspicious about being happy. Is my point.
We live in the age of rage, and it's, happiness is always quantified as someone maybe being up to something, but that irrelevant.
Right, it's suspicious. There's something weird about being happy.
Yeah, something weird and being content. So let me just do my little thing here. So the Hold Up TV is primarily a channel where we get a chance and opportunity to bring people, the content creators, and discuss and interview the people that bring you some of your favorite content. For me personally, you are up there as one of my favorite content creators. I've made no secret of this, man. I really actually enjoy watching your videos. Friendship aside, we have a long history with each other. I enjoy your
I know if I sucked, you would tell me.
Oh,
you'd tell me right away.
There'd be no chance. I'd call you until you pick up the phone. Like, hey, just. I have the honor of hosting a podcast which you called Fanboy Modeling School, and I've had you on my other podcast with my good buddy.
Which is a podcast on another level, by the way.
Yes, it's on another level. And I've had you on my other podcast, Talking with a Dad, as a guest. But I want to give people the opportunity to get to know the person that brings them such amazing content. So we're going to start this interview off with your normal interview questions, which is, how'd you get started?
How did I get started? that's funny. So I never meant to be a YouTuber is absolutely the first thing I have to say. And, I have to press this, but when people hear that you're a YouTuber, they think that they're like, oh, crazy. You must have 10,000, 100,000, a million subscribers. And actually most YouTubers do not. I have in the hundreds. I've been doing it for about a year and a half, and I love every minute of it. But I never intended to have this irregular thing. It actually started a year and a half ago. I was in front of the news. I was like half awake, woke up, went downstairs, and I'm sipping my coffee and watching the news. And I remember there was 3 just dreadful news stories on that just enraged me. And I remember one of them was was about how the women's soccer team, when they won the World Cup, they got they got a shorter parade route than most people. Like the Yankees would have gotten longer. And then there was this horrible, tragic story of the grandfather who's playing with his granddaughter over the railing or out of a window of a cruise ship, and the child slipped and fell. And then he had the audacity to be like, I'm going to sue you guys. I'm going to sue the cruise liner. And I was appalled by this. And the third story I can't even remember, but I just remember I was grumpy. I thought there was a lot of nonsense in the world. So I turned on my phone and I recorded myself busting jokes. And I just said, I had my coffee in my hand, and I said, welcome. I said, what is it? I said, welcome to Morning Reflections. I am your host, the Fat Mantis. Why Morning Reflections? I think I was just trying to, mimic or make jokes about like the nature of morning talk show, right?
Right.
And I made these jokes and I just put it on Facebook of all places. And I just got a huge response of people saying it's so funny. They're like, you need to make a YouTube channel. You need to make a YouTube channel. You need to make a YouTube channel. So I eventually just caved in and I was like, why don't I just do more of these? And so although I would later pivot, originally my first YouTube thing that I was doing was making comedy about news stories in the world.
So, it's funny, man. This is really funny. I actually remember the early content. I remember that video, and I remember the things you would do, the morning reflections where you were just doing social commentary. And I know how unpopular it is to do social commentary now. You can catch a lot of slack if you have an opinion about anything that goes outside of the norm. It's funny because previously during the Obama administration, people wanted more social commentary, right? They wanted people to be more in tune with the news and to make light of it because of the Daily Show and stuff like that.
Right, and it got cranked. It got cranked to an 11. The problem is when one side cranks it to an 11, the other side cranks it to 12.
Right.
And so that's when we're at the state where now it's horrible to hear about politics.
Yeah, most people will end Thanksgiving then. But let me ask you this question, right? So obviously, you've pivoted, right? That's not the content you make now. But before we get into the content you make now, I want to talk a little bit more about the content you made before. So you did this story. You did the story about the. You did the video about the grandfather, the tragic incident with the grandfather and the grandchild. You do the story about the women's soccer parade. What other things do you remember doing early on? Like, what are some other memorable videos?
Well, a lot of videos. Why I remember them is they pissed a lot of people off, and that would be later on one of the driving forces for me pivoting. So I remember I did a walkabout around a farmer's market in like a very rich white suburban neighborhood, and then I mocked how utterly white and anemic it was, and what an experience. And I even got on video a group of white guys acting like mariachis. They're like a bunch of white guys putting on like a fake Spanish accent, singing a Spanish song. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I'm just saying if you've ever been to a highbrow farmer's market, it's a hysterical sight. So I did that. I did the cocaine shortage. That was the year that they the Coast Guard had stopped a submarine filled with cocaine, and America had cocaine shortage. I had a lot of jokes about doctors and lawyers not getting their fix. I remember R. Kelly was one that I made a lot of jokes about R. Kelly and his situation, and I got so much hate for that one. People were hate watching and bashing and thumbs downing, man. It was a wild ride.
So this is when everything was back on Facebook, wasn't it? Like everything was like,
yeah, it started on Facebook, and then it was the first couple of episodes were on Facebook, and then I I did end up putting them on YouTube. I don't know if I've unlisted. I may have unlisted them. So that not anyone can see my original stuff because they were crude. They had no editing. It was just me and a cell phone.
Gotcha. Let me ask you a question. So let's get back to the the response, the people responding. What were those early responses like? Because it's like out of nowhere. We're in the age of social media, so everyone can do an IG live. Everyone can just record a video. Like, I'm out eating pancakes with my friends and stuff like that. But what was that like? Seeing people respond to your content negatively or positively?
So if you mean the people in my videos or the people outside of them,
well,
so for instance, the farmers markets, I was saying they all look like normal American citizens, but we all know that they have tattoos of swastikas somewhere on their chest. And as I said that, a group of white people were walking by that, and you could see in the video that they stop and they look over at me like I'm a psychopath. But in terms of like friends, I wouldn't even have friends. My own sister at one point, I made a joke that she thought was crossing a line, and she's like, that is not funny at all. And I don't think she spoke to me for like a week or two, and that's cool. My beautiful, lovely sister, I love her. But like, that's the problem when you do social commentary. That's, there always has to be a butt of a joke, of some joke. Right. So you're making fun of somebody. And so when you're hitting the politics end up affecting everybody on some level.
Okay. So
right. So there will be eventually somebody pissed off. And if you have social media where you have thousands of family and friends, right? You have Facebook, you have high numbers, but they're all like cousins and stuff, right?
Right.
Someone's going to get offended when they see your video.
So let me ask you a question. Where do you think you draw the line between offensive and satire?
So to be honest, and I don't know where I get this from because my family, they're allergic to comedy. Apparently, I might be the only joke teller in my family, but I'm not saying I don't have a line, but I try my best to laugh and think of things funny, even things that mock me. As long as the person doing it is being playful, I'm totally fine.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so I'm not saying there isn't a line, but I don't think that there's anything really that should be beyond humor or making fun of. There shouldn't be anything that's entirely serious.
Yeah, but I do notice that you have a sense of discernment that where you're like, okay, so that's crossing a line or that's just insensitive. But I want you to bookmark that for a second. Hold that thought, thinking about what's insensitive. Let's talk about the content now, and I think we could turn back around. So what are you doing now? What's the channel's primary focus now?
So it slowly evolved into a movies, television show, and comic book review show.
Okay.
Which I found it doesn't necessarily give you more subscribers, because the truth is I had steady growth back then, as I have steady growth now. It's not faster or quicker or anything like that, but I do find I get a lot less thumbs down, a lot of less hatred. You know what I'm saying? It's more neutral. Although I still get it, for instance, like if I point something out, like, well, thing I constantly get messed up on is when I point something out as racist in media, there's always a group of knuckleheads who hate on it.
And they just come after you.
But they're like, you're the racist, you're the idiot, blah, 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 blah. The other day I did one on the Golden Globes being so white this year. And there were a ton of them. We're all coming out, you know what I'm saying? And, if you look at their profiles, well, you know who they voted for in the last two elections.
But here's the thing, right? So like the content now, because we've talked about this before, and we talked about it last night when we folks, for anyone not knowing, Roy and I attempted to do this interview before, and there were some technical difficulties, but we had a great No, I have to, because I can't be inauthentic, and it's hard to pretend. And so, but here's the thing: I had identified while I was doing research for this interview, going back and working my way through all your content, 3 clear stages in your content as a fan, right? And that's just the way I am when I'm conducting an interview. I want to know everything about a person, or at least everything about their content. And so, you had the early stages, the social commentary, the rough cuts on Facebook, right? And those were great. And I remember you saying something to Zach and I, we were like, yeah, but you can't trust your family and friends. Everyone will tell you that these things are great. And then you move on to YouTube, and I start noticing that the videos become more polished. It's obvious that you're taking them a bit more serious, and you start doing, reviews. One of the first reviews that I ever watched you do on YouTube was for American Horror Story. Tell me about that.
So American Horror Story is like one of these shows that, like, I don't know, I think a lot of people, it is popular.
Right.
But I think it is an incredibly smart story. And so I've, when I've studied writing, I've actually, taken writing courses and stuff, and I've studied horror, and I can tell that Ryan Murphy, the producer, he knows his horror. He knows his legends. He refers back to like the rich history of horror in America, particularly. It's way smarter than you think, but he also adds this salaciousness to it. I love it. I absolutely love the show. So it was about this time where I'm starting to pivot. And I had decided before American Horror Story 1984 came out that I was going to do every episode. I was like, that's it. I'm going to be committed every episode, every week. I'm not going to miss an episode of reviewing that.
Right.
And so it gave me this kind of false positive, as they call them, because what happened was it was so well received. And what it is that American Horror Stories, and I realize that it's underrepresented, on the internet. Now, don't get me wrong. You type its name into YouTube, you're going to get a ton of stuff.
Right.
But it is underrepresented of stands who are reviewing and going in deep dives and theories and stuff. There aren't a lot of those videos compared to anything else, compared to Marvel or something, right?
Right.
So I was before getting, when I would get 70 hits on my earlier videos, it would be amazing. I would get some hits in the hundreds, some in the thousands from American Horror Story stuff. And I was like, why am I making this comedy? But it was a false positive, because not all fandoms are like this. And it actually speaks uniquely to that fandom, that they are very open to something new. Or maybe there isn't enough reviews like that, but they're into it. But there are other fandoms that are less nice to you, or more critical of your work. Perfect example is Star Wars. I love Star Wars. I was raised on Star Wars. It's amazing. But the fandom was never nice to me when I would review something on Star Wars. Even if I was saying it was good, there's some group who hates it. And if I said something was bad, there's some group that stands it. And, but American Horror Story was a great uplifting experience. That and like The Watchmen are like my favorite things to review.
So when you're talking about the fandom for American Horror Story and having that positive experience, but have you done any individual interaction with any of the fans? Like, has anyone ever like had a conversation with you? Or have you ever like had that type of reach out or interaction?
Well, there are those fans that would join me, would sub to my channel, and they would always reoccur, and they'd come up to me and they'd be like, "Will you review this horror movie? You will do this thing." And I didn't want my channel to be all horror.
Right.
But another thing they're into is like conspiracy videos and like ghoulish videos. So I did some of those, and also great success. I did one. I don't know if you saw that one. It's about the spirit Zozo.
Yes.
And I did some study about how the spirit Zozo is connected to the year 2020, astrologically and numerologically. And, it's a conspiracy theory. You don't really know what's going on here. It talks about mystical stuff, but people love that. I still get comments like every couple of days on that video. People seem to love that video.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like it, man. I know that with certain fandoms, it can be toxic, right? That's a word that we're probably going to explore later on. Toxicity.
Yeah, it's a cliche word, but it's apt.
Yeah, you know what? That's actually a good question now, bookmark too, because it's like, where does toxicity start and where does oversensitivity start? But we'll be circling back around to that. So
right.
you have the success with the fandom of American Horror Story. Those videos were great, by the way, your reviews, because you can always tell when someone is really into it. But
thank you.
Yeah, no, it's an easy compliment to give. Here's the thing I want to ask you though. So clearly you're a person that knows not just horror, but understands, how should I put this? You understand pop culture, but you also understand the creativity behind pop culture. Now, I know that you went to school for this, right? And you went to school for performing arts, and you went to school for poli-sci. So let's go back to your earlier stuff before. How did going to school for poli-sci? Where did you go to school for poli-sci anyway?
SUNY New Paltz.
So how did that impact the political stuff you were doing? Like, did it give you because I notice it most times on the internet when someone has a political opinion, it's often an uneducated one. What was that experience like for you?
That's putting it mildly. Not that I would ever think that someone needs to be educated in poli-sci to have an opinion. Right. It's important in a democracy for everyone to have an opinion. And however, I would also say it's all right to abstain from having an opinion.
Right.
For being undecided, that's totally valid. But you are right. A lot of people will say things and comments, and I'm like, "Has this kid ever read a book?" You know what I mean? Like, some people are like, "Where did you find that out?" And I'm like, "Read a book. Any book will tell you." But the truth is, man, the truth is that it's the one of the reasons that makes me like love making fun of politics, making fun of the whole scene. It's all comedy.
Right.
It has to do with why I stopped being a poli-sci major. And what it was is that poli-sci, all the major is that you go and the teachers like us to have discussions and debates. But what it is that everyone seems to have an opinion and be on a side, and they are grounded in their side. Right. And all the debate does is ground them even further in their side. So you'd be like, I'm going to totally convince these people. And they did research too. And they're not listening. Nobody's listening. And I'm like, it's so frustrating that I got to the point where I was like, what's the point of this? I thought I'd be like, go to poli-sci and then I'd become a lawyer and I might do something, in that field. And however, I wanted to do that not for like money or fame or something. I wanted to make a difference, but I became jaded and I was like, there is no making a difference because people just won't listen.
Right.
And so I always try to play devil's advocate. I like listening to other people, but most people don't. Most people like listening to themselves.
Right.
So I was like, this is a futile thing. I'm going to go get drunk. That's literally what it is. I'm like, why should I study hard when nothing matters? Like basically, like I said, like we're all a bunch of people living on a ball of dirt that is hurtling through space. Nothing matters. I'm going to go get drunk. Nobody knows anything. I'm sorry, kids. I'm sorry if this seems like a very, destitute or like, a hopeless cast right now. So I decided that, what's better? You know what does make a difference though in the world? Art.
Okay.
Art, making people laugh, making people have a good time. And I already was like an amateur writer, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to pursue writing. So I didn't actually do writing. I finished with communications and media arts.
Stop right
so
there.
That's like
Let me ask you about that. What was the experience with communications and media arts? Tell us more about that.
well, it is interesting. So, I would have preferred to be a film guy, like gone to a film school, but you see New Paltz, state school. At the time, not as big as it is now. It's been growing, but they don't have all the facilities or all the things. Like even at the time, the cameras they were giving us were dated. They're giving us dated editing equipment. Like they'd be like, this isn't what you'd see in the modern thing, but this is an old one. And they shared resources with this nearby community college, Ulster County Community College. And so some of my classes, or to do things with them, I had to commute back and forth between New Paltz and the offsite. So when I got to there, they had not only classes and equipment we could use, also not super sophisticated, but they also had like internships and jobs. And one of the things I took was being a radio DJ for the internet radio station at SUNY Ulster.
What was that like? What was that like?
It definitely helped me focus the gift of gab, because like I had to learn how to fill dead air.
Okay.
Right. And it's not as easy as you think, filling dead air.
Right.
Whether it's through a joke or information or whatever, it's not the easiest thing in the world. But I did that, and I kind of thought I was like, pardon my French, I thought it was hot shit. You know what I mean? I was kind of good at it.
Right.
But I unfortunately, and this is like a big moment in my life, that radio show would be taken away from me.
Tell us more about what was the content of the radio show? What type of what did you guys do?
So you're listening to WSRS, home of the hizzy and the hop. So I was the Riz. I called myself the Riz, and I did a hip hop, like a hip hop. It was underground because you're in college and everyone listens to independent music rather than the radio.
Right.
So I didn't want to do mainstream stuff. I did stuff like the arsonists, people under the stairs, or people like that, like artists like that. And I did this hip hop show, and I would have like political talk on it. Right. Absolutely. I'd have people call in. I'd have all sorts of stuff going on. And, I ended up getting 3 strikes as the head of their communications department. I'm not going to say his name, but like he was a local weatherman, and this is in Ulster County. And he thought he was hot as, he thought he was God's gift, the communications game. Right.
Right.
And so I could just tell he just didn't like me. He had a cheap suit on. He wore a cheap suit every day, right? And, he had a little Hitler mustache, and he just sized me up, and I could tell he just didn't like me. So he was, in my personal opinion, people aren't always out to get you, but he was out to get me. So ultimately, it would be that, like, one of my strikes was, like, I went on without a producer. Like, if you don't, the producers just sits in the booth, and like if you curse, they bleep it out. There's a 5-second delay or something.
Right.
I went on without a producer maybe once or twice, and a curse got in the air, and I would get strikes. And then the third strike was like this epic fail on his in his opinion, but not in mine. So, I assume you are aware of the Unabomber.
Yes.
Like the story of the Unabomber.
Yes.
So the Unabomber's brother, after he turned him in, and his brother eventually got the death penalty, his brother did a tour, and I'm assuming he still does the tour of colleges that he goes around the nation. This became his job rather than doing whatever he used to do, to talk about his experiences with his brother, but also why the death penalty is good. So there's a man who turned in on his own brother. And right. So one day as a call-in show, the topic, and this was the day the Unabomber's brother was coming to our campus to talk. He was going to have a talk in the lecture center or whatever. And I was like, this is a controversial figure, guys. What do you guys think? Your brother is mailing bombs to people. living in a shack in the middle of nowhere, would you turn him in? And that was my question of the day. And I had people call in and talk about it, and trying to have intelligent debate. My thesis by the end of the show was that the Unabomber's brother is scum. You shouldn't turn in your brother. You should try to deal with it or confront him rather than let the feds go and kill your brother, kill your own brother.
Right.
So this is what I said. I have no issues with it. However, like a day or two later, I was called into his office. The communications, the director of the communications department at Ulster, and he gave me it all, man. He was like, you're like a shock jock. You're like that Howard Stern guy. Well, you're just trying to shock people. You don't even believe half the things you say. And I had to hear this guy. He gave me a great lecture. I didn't even know this is where it was headed because I didn't understand what was happening. And so he gets to lecture me. It's like half an hour in, probably. I just remember I was eye rolling him. I'm like, oh, brother, okay. You don't like me. I get it. And then he's like, and that's why I have to take away your show. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said, you offended a guest of this university. And I said, we are an internet radio show. There is no way in hell the Unabomber's brother even knew that broadcast was going on, or let alone heard it. But he was like, no, you have offended somebody, a guest of this campus. He could have heard it. Who knows? You don't do that. Blah, 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 blah. You should have checked with me, which, by the way, that wasn't the policy. We didn't check with people when we went on. People would go on the air, like the other DJs, and they would just say whatever. They would say the great, maybe not as fun as me, but they'd say stupid things. They would have stupid content, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, when people aren't checked, when you're not double checking, people just say stupid things on the internet.
People go off the hinges.
So, however, somehow I'm singled out, and I got my show taken away from me.
Let me ask you a question. So with the communication stuff, and now I think we're getting to the place where the people are going to be really interested, right? And if they're interested now, how did that impact you in regards to the way you do content now? Like having something like that taken away from you?
So what it is that like some people are like, oh, he learned his lesson or whatever. No, I was so sure that I was right. I doubled down on it. I said I would finish, finish the program or whatever. But another thing is like, I took that very spirit of the Riz and I put it on my original YouTube. That's what I was doing.
Okay.
That's what it was. It was like you got a visual treat of repping with the Riz right there, except I didn't have hip hop music. But the world is a ridiculous place, and everything, like I said, can be made fun of, but everything should also be criticized. There is right and wrong in every single phenomenon in this universe. There is no right political party. There is no way to live correctly. There's just all these different takes. And if you're coming from a different take, it is hysterical to see the other take. And I think that's one of the problems with the divide in this country. People don't get that it's not tragic that some Antifa doesn't understand a QAnon person. It's ridiculous that you both exist. You know what I'm saying? So I was there to make fun of that.
Right.
But like I said, I was getting so much flack from people. They were all, every time I'd get lectured, I would just have remember that communications teacher.
It's funny, man, because, when I think about content creation, when you think about content creation on YouTube, there is, you hear the word creation as someone's creating things. Often it's usually just someone commentating on something, or it's someone giving their opinion on something, what have you. But on your channel, when you're doing your reviews, let's take, for instance, your review of the show Black AF. If you don't know what that acronym is for, then Google it. But it's a show that came on Netflix. It's actually
they don't know what it is. Come out from the rock.
Yeah, come from under the rock.
You live in.
The creator of Black is Black as F. Is also the creator of the show Blackish, and he did a more realistic version, not more realistic, but he did a more unedited version of that show on Netflix. And I remember I watched that review. My favorite review by far. I've told you this time and time again. I rarely will watch a YouTube video more than twice, but I watched that review at least 10 times. Not to boast your numbers, but because I was like, oh man, this is really, really good. And I noticed that there was a talent that you had for doing this. Anyone can get in front of a mic and just start saying, oh, this is horrible or this sucks. but you actually had done your research. There was compare and contrast to other things, and I noticed that there's that's when I started to notice that there's an actual art form to content creation. But you're not a stranger to being a creative. Tell me about your formative years. Where does all that stuff come from?
And well, for starters, thank you for saying all those things. That means a lot to me. But yeah, I am assuming like you meant like, yeah, so I am an artist. And so actually before I was doing YouTube, I was doing web comics.
Okay.
And even before that, in high school, I went to LaGuardia. I'm from New York. I went to LaGuardia, which is the LaGuardia High School for Music, Art, and the Performing Arts. And I was a visual arts major. I drew and I painted while you guys were taking chemistry or whatever. No, I took chemistry. But, really what it was less sports. We did less sports, like gym kind of stuff. I think the only thing we got to weasel out of was like 1 year of foreign language or something like that. But any way they could trim stuff, they would jam you with your major, and my major was visual arts. So I was always, and I had a focus in sculpting by the end of my high school experience.
Right.
Great place, man. Great place. Well, I would say that like it is not your typical high school at all, and it's very different than later on. I would learn that there wasn't any other high school like that.
Yeah.
It's an anomaly. Like, so like, at that school, like punk rockers were cool. Goth kids were cool. Sports people weren't cool. That didn't make them cool.
Right. But here's the thing about like LaGuardia is not just so performing arts school. There's something else at play here that I think I sense. Like, I know you went to LaGuardia, and I know you studied arts. Was this something that you were raised with? Like, was it something that you were raised with? Were you raised around the creative process?
Oh, yeah, actually, now you're saying formative. Oh, I'm sorry. You meant like formative years. Okay. I like to block those out. So yeah, both of my parents are visual artists. Now,
Okay.
Only my father by profession. My mother was a teacher, was a foreign language teacher in high schools, but she grew up being a painter. She was a painter, throughout my house. There's all these paintings that she did when she was younger. And so my house, I was just like an artsy, came from an artsy background. So like when other kids were out playing basketball or Little League or whatever, I was at home with like cray paws or oil paints, and that's what we did when we were little. And that was just how it was. And I didn't question it. I didn't think it was weird. So it was always, and like, there was no question I wasn't going to LaGuardia. I think like when I was 6, I was like, I'm going to go to music and art.
Yeah.
That was a little Roy voice.
So when you got to LaGuardia, when you started going to school there, man, and you started studying, and as you moved through like adulthood, what made you decide like, hey man, I want to do something else? What was the first thing? Was there anything that a catalyst or anything that sparked that inside of you?
Oh, you're saying that I didn't want to do art?
No, that you did want to do art.
Well, so here's actually the weird mutation of this.
Okay.
So I am going to an art school. I'm living in the bubble of art schoolery, and I don't know how the real world works. And it's funny, movies and stuff make high schoolers seem more wiser than they ever are, and really they're just, no offense, kids, dipshits who don't know anything. You need some life experience behind you. But I was convinced that this was not the way, and that the reason why I immediately jumped into poli-sci when I went to college is because I didn't want anything to do with arts, or so I thought. I was like, I want to get a good job. I want to be a lawyer. I was into debate. I was in the debate club and stuff like that. I did this program, Legal Outreach, when I was a kid. I wanted to be a dude in a suit. So I went to college and I did that. And then when I saw what non-artists do, and they do it very unartistically, I was like, this is not for me. And so that way I was like, well, I'll write. And so even when I would, I would try to become a writer, I did the communications mainly because I wanted to be like a television writer. I wanted to write like shows and stuff. Yeah. But once again, when I would get out of it, I would get into web comics, and art would come back into my life. So it was like, it was embedded in me, and there was no other choice.
So we start looking at that type of stuff, right? So you're out of college. I remember coming to visit you up in New Paltz. Actually, one of my favorite stories of time. No need to go for that on air. That's more of that's more of a fanboy topic. But you're out of college, man. Your time with poli sci is over. And I remember we had reconnected after not seeing each other for years. And I was coming to meet you at a buddy's house, and you were doing web comics now. And I remember I brought my phone with me, and we're taking pictures for the comics, the stills, and you're explaining to me the process. And we did. It was the most fun I'd had in quite some time. We took all the pictures for the book itself. What was the name of the webcomic? What is the name of the webcomic?
Okay, so that was my first like real webcomic. And so actually it wasn't my first real. I had done a webcomic before, but this was going to be my first ongoing one, and it was called Romancing the Cosmos. And so that is a sci-fi like superhero anthology. So every issue would be different. And so for the viewer who doesn't know, there's all these filters. The filters nowadays are crazy. But back then, how long ago was it?
That was, I've been married
12, 13 years ago or something.
No,
they did have filters, but they had these filters, like in Photoshop and other things that could turn a photo into looking like it was a drawing. Right. And so I was more of a digital artist. That, I learned a lot of Photoshop in college and stuff. I was not the big drawer, illustrator or whatever, but I was like, why don't I just film or why don't I take photos of my friends posing as superheroes?
Right.
And then after we take the photo shoots, I digitize them. I add, I draw just the parts I need to correct the drawing, as a filmmaker would say in post.
Right.
And get a comic. And you were really awesome being the photographer on that one. And actually you posed for the villain at one point. He's like a helmeted guy. So you can't tell that it's you. But I remember there's a picture of you being like this.
Yeah. We were like putties. I remember you said, you were like, think of yourself as putties.
Took the bicycle helmet and put them on your face.
Yes.
Yes. So it was so much fun. And that's another cool thing about it is that is just a fun way to do a comic book. Yeah. You could draw, and that's a great way, and that's the way most people do it. But a fun way is getting together with your friends and having them put on tights.
That is a fun way to do it. But tell me about the content itself. Tell me about what was the concept behind romancing the cosmos. Like, what was the story? Tell us about that.
So, one could say there is no story, and one could say there's 1,000 stories. right? You feel me? So it is an anthology. So every issue was a different character and a different focus. And so I was kind of biting off of David Lampum's, what is that book called? Stray Bullets. Have you ever read Stray Bullets?
No.
So Stray Bullets is indie comic. It's from El Capitan Comics. I bet you've never heard of that. I bet you
it's an amazing
Stray Bullets
name.
And maybe one or two other titles is the only thing they sell. This is like really indie comic. And it's a pulp noir comic where one character would be doing something in an issue. Let's say the first issue. I remember the first issue very well. It's about a young man who works for the mafia. He's a little runty kid, and the only job he can do in the mafia is get rid of their dead bodies. And so he's on he drives out to the country he puts them in a swamp, and he's driving out. And during it, he's having these hallucinations as to who's in the trunk for various reasons, whatever. And so his character stops at a gas station and he buys some cigarettes and he has a quick chat with the guy behind the counter. And then he gets in and he continues, and his story continues. And it actually has a finite end at the end of that issue.
Right.
And so the next issue was not about him at all. The next issue was about the guy he bought cigarettes from.
Nice. Yeah.
And that guy's girlfriend is a junkie, and she wants to rip off the guys who sell her out drugs. And he wants to do that as well because they want to move out of that area. And they're trying to rip off these guys. And that's the story. And every time they encounter somebody, not any person, but randomly, the bullets change. They're stray bullets, right?
Right.
And it was just a brilliant way to tell a story, or a million stories.
Right.
So I remember I was trying to get my start in comic books, and I actually would say that I'm at a convention. I think it was Kelly Sue DeConnick who told me at like a breaking in panel, is probably breaking into comics, that she said, if you've never, don't don't think about writing an epic, which is funny. I had an epic in mind. I was ready to make an epic, a comic book epic. She said, don't start with an epic. Save your epic for when you're established. Don't write a 5,000 page book. Write a 5-page book. Start with 5 pages and see if you can do that.
Right.
And so she also pointed out that like in anthologies, it teaches you to write in other people's voices because the voices are always changing.
Right.
Because some writers can only write not one voice, but they know their character so well, which is that's a great thing to know.
Right.
Right. Like, who's the Harry Potter woman? What's her name?
Oh, well, of course, you put me on the spot like that. Now I can't remember.
Anyway, love her. She's wonderful. But, one of the arguments was that she knew Harry Potter so in-depthly, and she knew all of them, Ron and all Hermione and all these people. She knew them so well. And then later on, when she tried to get a career as writing like thrillers under a man's name, people didn't like the books. They discovered that this other writer was her. And one of the reasons is that she was really apt at her writing her friends. But not these other ones. So I was like, let me do anthology.
Okay.
Let me do this anthology. So the idea is I was going to do a science fiction superhero version of that, where the characters don't necessarily reoccur. Sometimes they reoccur, but I wanted to do a million stories. And so that's what Romancing the Cosmos is. And that's actually what the title is about.
It's a great concept, man. Like when we were talking about it last night and just thinking about it now in this moment, the universe building that you were undergoing in that storyline was amazing. The holiday specials, the Halloween one was really cool. The Santa Claus, the evil Santa Claus one was amazing. But I noticed that same trend in your content creation as well, in your YouTube content creation. So you have Voice of the Fat Mantis. Now we're getting to what I consider to be the middle iteration of your career, but it's split into various different channels. And I didn't get to touch on this last night, and I kept telling myself to say it. So you'll have one video that's completely dedicated to reviewing, say, WandaVision. And then you'll have another style of video completely dedicated to reviewing Raised by Wolves. And you've split them into subgenres in there. And you come up with these unique names. Are you drawing on all of those from like...
Which is confusing a lot of people. Like I might have to eliminate it. It's like it was like a fun thing.
No. I don't think it's confusing at all. I think if you know your pulp stories, it's actually interesting. Let's just go through some of the names. What was the name you came up with for Raised by Wolves? No, I'm sorry, not Raised by Wolves. What's the show about robots on HBO?
That's Raised by Wolves. That's Raised
by
Wolves.
No. Westworld.
Oh, Westworld.
Yes.
So no, wait, hold on. You're confusing how it works. It's not every show gets its own individual, like my show review of that.
Okay.
I broke them down into like genres, right?
Right.
So almost sci-fi, and this is non-comic sci-fi.
Okay.
Are shows to astonish.
That's
right.
Perfect. Yes.
Comic book content is the last romantic. Right. And so horror stuff is the devil's film school.
I like
it. You see where we're going with that?
Yes, I like it.
General entertainment. I was about to ask if I could say this, but we've already been cursing. Yeah. General entertainment news, like what is Keanu Reeves doing and who's marrying and who's banging who, would be entertain me, bitch. I'm sure you're going to ask me this question, but like because of Taylor Swift, all my conspiracy videos went under the header Satan Watch. There are a bunch of others. Obviously, we have our podcast one, Fanboy Modeling School. That's for obvious reasons. That's the name of the podcast. I'm trying to think if there were other ones.
But where do you draw on that from? Is that all coming from your influence from like noir stories and pulp stories, just giving them this? Because they're all interconnected. Every one of your reviews are interconnected because even though it might be about a different show, you have a very distinct style in the way you describe these things. Where does that all come from, man?
I guess the anthology thing lives on in my heart that like, people are like, what should you name your show? Well, I'm someone who wants to name 10 shows. I have 10 names for shows. I don't just have one.
Right.
And so it's sometimes hard for people to come up with one. I love the creativity. Like, I have a list. As any good writer, I have a list of different plots I'm going to use and different things and titles for things, titles for issues of comics, titles for issues of episodes of a show. I just write what would be a good title. And I'm like, this would be a good title for something. This would be a good title. It sounds good. And like, I'd write the title and the little synopsis of what it's about. And so if I ever end up writing that story, so like, like for instance, like The Last Romantic, the concept is like people love superhero movies. They don't love superhero books. Right. The comic is unfortunately the dying art. However, I love comics and I love the feel of people are like, use digital comics. I will if I have to, but I would prefer to have a comic book in my hand.
Right.
And that makes me The Last Romantic because no one else is doing that. You know what I mean?
No, I know exactly what you mean. With everything moving in the direction it is, do you think it really is a dying art form?
It is, and I have to say, I am going to end up still publishing my graphic novel.
Okay.
That unfortunately, even when I started YouTube, was already like, it was most of the script was written and stuff. Still going to do it. Still going to finance it. It's going to happen. And I hope to do more in the future. But the thing is that it might be the indie guys who survive and the big guys are going to go in flames, or the big guys will only publish to give stories for the movies and the shows. It's like, what is it? The cart has gotten in front of the horse.
Yes.
And so that's what it is. It used to be that the lords of these movies were the comics. You need the comics for it. And now because the movies generate so much money, they're overtaking the comics and they're publishing less. They're, DC the other day, a couple months, it might have even been a year ago, gutted their departments, editorial, got rid of all these people. They're shrinking.
Right.
These are one of the big twos. So it might be a good thing that I pivoted because I had this dream that I was like, I'm going to work for one of the big twos. Well, they might not exist by the time I make it. So what is the point? So I better just hope my YouTube horse comes in.
Let's go back to the YouTube thing, because before we were talking about toxicity and sensitivity, and I wanted to lead you and steer you this way, man. So you're no longer doing you stopped doing the social commentary stuff, but then you start fanboy modeling school with me, and we often get into fandom and social commentary because those things now overlap. You can just as much love a comic book and dislike it the next issue because you'll hear someone say something interesting like they're pushing a narrative. We can go down that rabbit hole if you'd like. But let's start with the distinction between toxicity and content creation. What does that mean to you?
So, I mean, that is a very layered question. It's very complicated. I think some people would quick to say toxicity is when Star Wars fans don't like strong women, right, or any woman, which is false. That's a false narrative going around. And so what is the real toxicity? And so I would just, so Josh Whedon, I'm sorry I brought him up on your show, but
that's all right.
People hate him so much. But he had said, like, when people asked him about, like, in the interviews why Age of Ultron didn't do so well in terms of fan reaction, and they were angry at him for multiple things that he did on adapting these things. And he said, we've reached this age where because of the internet, everyone's got their opinion up there and they're saying their things. And they've gotten to the point where, like, they want you to do it their way, and it's unacceptable to do it your way. And so when I saw him, I felt so bad for him. And this is before any of the, the accusations came out about him. He was just an artist who was, people were turning on him. Right. But it is true that, like, everybody wants it their way. And if it isn't their way, they have a cow and then they publicized it.
Right.
And so what it is like a snake eating its own tail. You have these kids who claim to be fans of something, but they're willing to hack it to pieces to say this is the stupidest thing that ever happened. This is such garbage. I don't like The Last Jedi. If you watch my channel, it's very clear I don't like the Last Jedi. However, when The Last Jedi came down, I got out of it. I didn't love it, but I accepted that it was the movie they made.
Right.
I didn't like that was Luke Skywalker, but whatever, that's what it is. However, I would go on the internet and find out that these kids are just rejecting it. And they're like, it's like fan fiction. How dare they do this? And so basically their argument is that Luke Skywalker has to be what I say he is,
Right.
or it's invalid. And so I don't like that. And that is what toxicity is.
So it sounds like to me, just, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying it's the reaction, right? It's the projection or the disappointment people have with seeing their favorite things and the way they react to it. And I think we see that a lot. I hate to use this as the example, but we do see it a lot with Star Wars, right? There's the fandom menace. Very interesting group,
yes.
Right? And and response to disappointment. But where's the line between sensitivity and oversensitivity? Or do those things overlap? Because how do you stay true to making content that you enjoy and other people enjoy without worrying about someone having a negative reaction?
Oh, well, in recent things, I have realized that I cannot cater or worry if somebody is unhappy.
Okay.
It is a complete pointlessness. The point of having a YouTube channel, or, I recently went to this new platform, which is all audio streaming, live streaming, called Spoon. Okay. And they do a show there, Rogue Planet, Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern. But what's the point of having it if you edit yourself and you don't say what's really on your mind? What's the point of doing a review and being scared that people are going to retaliate unless you say what they want? So even if I'm getting unsubscribed to, F it. I'm going to be honest. Because at the end of the day, that's all I have.
Is there a navigation you use as like your moral compass? Because when we're looking at toxicity, what people consider to be toxic, and you're right, it is a layered question. It's a very broad statement, and the reason I pose it that way is because people usually use it in a very sweeping, broad way, and then you have trying to navigate not offending people's sensibilities. But at what point do you just go to yourself, take ownership, and say, hey, I don't want to be offensive for the sake of being offensive. I don't want to fall into that category. Is there a line there for you as a content creator?
So, okay, as an artist, and it's funny that we talked about my years of being like an artist and stuff, I definitely learned how you get shit on the internet.
Okay.
And it's, and to be honest, being a creator of anything, it is so hard to do, and it is so easy to criticize. And so if for anyone who just goes and takes a dump on someone's YouTube channel, takes a dump on their review, whatever they do, their art, their singing, whatever it is, I invite you, why don't you try creating and put it out there? When I started putting my web comics out, and I remember my first took me years to really get the art down. Even though I had this surefire way to make good art, it wasn't good art because I was, it took my limitations were to it. No. I used to get such hate comments on my website. Mantis Comics. I would wake up and I would see the orange dot and go, oh, someone's trying to contact Mantis Comics. Click in and someone would say something. They would take time out of their day to say some horrible things that I was a loser, that I would never amount to anything, that this is the worst thing in the world. And unfortunately, you got to get over that.
Right.
And you never truly get over it, but you do have to grow a thick skin because they're out there, man. You could be out there on Twitter and you could say, what a wonderful day. And there's going to be 10 people who say, F you, you're an idiot. This is a horrible day. What, are you blind? What, are you stupid? You don't see the rain? You must be incompetent. You're not a weatherman. There will be someone who say you're not a weatherman. I promise you that. So unfortunately, you have to have a thick skin against it. So there's one aspect of it. But once you start creating and you've heard all these horrible things, you're less likely to do it to other people. And so an example is like when I do reviews, I hate when I have to give something a horrible review.
Okay.
Because I'd rather talk about something I like.
Right.
But there's plenty of times when you're like, you can watch a movie and you're like, I have to. It's a superhero movie. I have to review it. And you go opening day and you're like smiling, and at the end you're like, I don't have anything nice to say about this, and it becomes a drag to make that video. There's some people who specialize in
being a
giving
drag.
bad news on the internet. They love crashing it. I'm not one of them.
Right.
I prefer to talk about shit that's dope. I'd rather review Endgame every week.
Dude, man, I'm going off topic here for the interview, man, but I'll never forget two instances. When you got a good fan buddy and you're in a good fandom, or you're amongst a group of people that enjoy something, because I agree with you, man. I think that projecting your view onto what the content is, it's going to lead to disappointment, and you're just going to be a sad sack. You're just going to be one angry person, and then you're going to put the name of the thing you hate most, and then the title of your channel, and then you'll just start making content based around that. Or you'll do the exact same thing that you accuse the SJWs of doing. You'll start inserting narratives into the content, which is your right. We protect that here at the Hold Up TP. But I remember contacting you after Infinity War, and I remember we stayed on the phone for like an hour, and you made a great comparison. I was just like, man, that was a good comparison. You're like, what did you say? You said Infinity War is the Casablanca of superhero movies. And I was like, dude, I'm like, that is amazing. I'm like, that was an amazing turn of phrase. And I want, with that said, man, I want to get to the Spoon stuff. So you are blue check certified, original content creator for Spoon Radio. Congratulations, by the way. I don't have sound effects on here, or I would insert the applause, but an amazing feat. So you have the show Thursday nights at 8 p.m. on Spoon. And this is really, really an interesting thing because it's a new platform, right? It's not Twitch. It's not YouTube Live. It's not Instagram Live. And you got in kind of ground level, and you get to create content. You kind of stand out, though, from the normal Spoon content creators on there, as in to say that you remind me more of your Radio with Riz days when you're on Spoon. Tell me about that.
So here's the crazy thing about it. So, like, I think maybe, like, 3 weeks ago, I would have totally agreed. No, I do agree with you on the Riz thing, but, like, about, like, the Spoon thing.
Right.
To survive on Spoon, or I guess any app, you have to use it and be part of the communities.
Right.
But the thing is that they hired me and a bunch of other people who are other content creators to do shows, like weekly shows. And not all of them are being part of the community, but I started to like the app and enjoyed going into the community.
Right.
And so I used to think I'm not like other creators, but I found out that one of the cool things about it is because it's like not a mainstream one like YouTube or these other apps, it hasn't been explored yet.
Right.
It's the undiscovered country, if you will. And so that would indicate that it's a ragtag bunch of motley crew people. And I remember tuning into these two girls' shows, and they're Spoon originals as well. I used to think, what am I listening to? This is unfocused nonsense. These girls are just hanging out.
Right.
This is madness. You know what? I listen to them religiously now because they do their thing and they do it so well and they're so genuine that they're two friends hanging out and we're listening to them hang out and they talk to the chat and they include people in their hangout session. And and they have a magic that no one else has.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
And so like I was saying, there's another girl who, she's not even original. She's not an original thing. She's just a user. However, she's got a great fan base, and she does all these voice characters. And she's like a voice actress.
Wow.
And she does all these different characters on her thing. And she's got this one main one with this fake British accent. And it's so endearing. And it's different. It's not radio you've ever heard before. It's something unique. And that's what it is. Everyone's bringing something unique to the table.
Right.
So I'm actually loving that. That it's true that like my show sounds like an old school radio show, which people are responding. I'm not saying I'm popular, but I'm saying like my fan base is growing faster than it did on YouTube, and people are into it. I have fans.
Yeah, but
I'm doing my job.
That's not to disparage you. I think there's something actually that's what makes it unique. But I want to try to get you to talk about that process more, which is so. What take me through your Spoon process of creating content for Spoon. What is the general idea for Rogue Planet?
So it is supposed to be similar to my YouTube channel.
Okay.
And originally when they were like, they wanted to hire me, I actually thought that I was just going to do an extra episode of Voice of the Fat Mantis on a podcast. That's what I kind of thought it was.
Right.
But this is not how the app works. So the app is actually interactive live streaming. So there's a chat section like a live stream on a YouTube. So people join in, they enter the room, and they ask you questions. They can even phone in. So while you're doing a report on something, people can interrupt you. And thank God what I did is I created like a fake account before I started my show. And I just went around to other rooms listening to people.
Okay.
And talking to people and getting the vibe of the fan base and like what's going on. And I came to the realization that this is like interactive voice of the Fat Mantis. You're trying to educate them in the news of comic book movies and television shows, right?
Right.
But at the same time have a conversation with them so they can take your conversation in other directions. And so the real question is, are you a professor that's going to go back to and be like, thanks, Tommy, but we need to stay on track? Or are you going to go with the flow of the conversation? And so it's like the audience has given me something and I've got something and we're going back and forth. And it's really cool. And once you get the hang of this live streaming stuff and being interactive, it's just a different way of doing it, and it's actually really cool.
Yeah, man, and I can tell by that from your engagement with the audience and your show. So now that you have this going, man, you got Rogue Planet, you got Voice of the Fat Mantis, you have all these different things.
Fanboy modeling school.
Let me ask you this question, man. And I asked you last night, and I want to see if you give a different answer because I'll probably edit in the answer from last night as well. What's the point of it all?
Okay.
What's the point of it all, man? What's the goal? What is it what is the lasting mark you want to leave behind with this? What do you hope to accomplish?
I want to stand on a pile of dead bodies of my enemies with the 40 in one hand and like a sexy blonde in the other.
Right.
I kid. This is I'm not a psychopath. I'm not a barbarian. That was probably like my, a couple lives ago.
That was good though. That was really good.
If you're into past lives. What is it all about? That is a tough one. So, it's like the importance of my name. A lot of people are like, why don't you call your channel Fat Mantis?
Right.
It's easier.
Right.
Why do I have to type in this voice of crap? I'm imitating a troll on the internet because that's sometimes I get questions all the time. Why do you call yourself the Fat Mantis? And it's like, none of your business. But why is it Voice of the Fat Mantis? It's so important that it's Voice of the Fat Mantis. And here's what it is. We have in this day and age, we have YouTube. We can do videos or chats or whatever on Instagram and Facebook. You can go live. You can document your life. You could do whatever. You could teach people things online. We have a way to reach other people unknown to man ever before. Like if me and you had grown up in the 80s,
right,
we wouldn't be able to do this, right? There would be no hold up TV.
Right.
You would be down and out working your job and you'd have a lot of opinions and you'd be able to tell 3 people if you're lucky.
Right.
Your bar friends.
Yeah.
Right? That's how it used to be. But now we live in this age of technology and wonder, and we can pass knowledge and information and opinions. And the point is that we all have a voice. I'm the Fat Mantis and I have a voice. And I've decided that like whether I make it big in this situation or don't, I am going to spread my voice. People will hear my voice. And if as they say, it doesn't matter if you have millions of followers or a few. We have a recent ex-politician who literally has a cult willing to do whatever he wants. He's got millions of followers. Doesn't mean that what he's saying is worthy, right? So it doesn't matter if I have 12 fans or 12 million fans. The point is that if I'm influencing or helping somebody or giving them knowledge or whatever it is they get out of me, brightening their day, maybe I'm lucky enough to do that to one person, then I'm going to do it. And I have this option. We all have this option. This is why the Hold Up TV is so important. This is why Fanboy Modeling School is so important. It's Rogue Planet, all of our things. People should get out there and share their voice. And that's what it is all about. So if I could get one kid to read a comic book, then I have lived a good life.
You know what? I was worried. My worry tonight was we weren't going to be able to recapture the magic. But, in all honesty, in my closing argument in regards to you as a content creator, I think people should take a real good chance. You folks, if you're listening, go listen to Voice of the Fat Mantis. Go watch all his earlier stuff. Go check out Romancing the Cosmos. And then really get to understand, man, and I don't get this compliment out easily. You are worth the interview. You're someone that I want to highlight and want to put out there because I think people would love to know the person behind the great stuff they watch on YouTube and the things they read, man. And I want to let you close out the show with your patented voice of the Fat Mantis echo.
Well, thank you. Steven, where can they find you?
Folks, you already found me at the Hold Up TV. You can find me on Anchor under the same name.
And of course, you can find me on Voice of the Fat Mantis for deep dives, reviews, and all sorts of other shenanigans in the sci-fi and comics realm. You can also find me at Twitter at Mantis Comics. Perhaps you want to debate me, push me around, tell me I'm garbage. Well, go for it. You can also find me every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern on Rogue Planet, only on the Spoon app. You get that right in the App Store, as well as Fanboy Modeling School, which is a weekly podcast you can find on Anchor. Other than that, I want you to remember to like, share, and subscribe, and keep tuning in to Hold Up TV. Until next time, ciao for now, bitches.